A two-bedroom stone house, 50 meters from the Atlantic Ocean. A garden with a fig tree. A neighbor who leaves vegetables on the doorstep on Tuesday mornings. The price? 74,000 euros. That is not a misprint from a 1990s property brochure. That is a real listing from a real coastal town in France, available right now. While British buyers battle over Dordogne farmhouses and overpriced Provençal villas, and while the Spanish costas fill with concrete holiday developments that were never designed for year-round living, there is an entirely different France, sitting quietly along thousands of kilometers of coastline, waiting for people who know where to look. France has the second longest coastline in Western Europe. The Atlantic, the Channel, the Mediterranean, the wild shores of Brittany, all of it stretching past towns that travel magazines forgot that property shows never filmed. Towns where the boulangerie opens at 6:30, the harbor wall has been repaired 3 times in 4 centuries, and house prices have not yet caught up with the quality of life on offer. 7 towns, real prices, real healthcare data, real transport links, and the honest truth about what each place actually costs to live in, not just to buy into. If you have ever looked at a French coastal property and assumed it was out of reach, this video is going to change that assumption. Number 7. Granville, Normandy. Stand on the headland at Granville on a clear morning, and the view arrives before the mind can process it. The English Channel stretches in every direction. The tidal islands of Chazy sit on the horizon like a rumor. Mont Saint-Michel is 25 kilometers to the south, close enough to see the silhouette on certain evenings, far enough away that the tourist coaches never stop here. Granville has around 13,000 permanent residents. It is a working town. Fishing boats still operate from the lower harbor. The covered market sells produce from the Manche Peninsula. And the fortified upper town contains streets that have looked broadly the same since the 17th century. This is not a museum village. People live here, work here, and grow old here with considerable satisfaction. Average property price, 170,000 euros. A 3-bedroom maison de ville with sea views, recently sold for 195,000 euros. A 2-bedroom apartment in the Hauteville with channel views sold for 148,000 euros. For a coastal town with genuine character and genuine infrastructure, these figures represent value that would be unthinkable on the English or Spanish coasts. The Centre Hospitalier de Granville provides full services including emergency care, serving the entire Manche coast 10 minutes from most residential areas by car. GP practices in Granville are actively accepting new patients, a detail worth noting for anyone arriving from Britain where finding a registered doctor can take months. The train connects Granville to Paris Montparnasse in 3 hours 15 minutes with direct services several times daily. Cherbourg is an hour north. Saint-Malo is under 90 minutes. Honest consideration, Granville faces the Channel, and the Channel is not the Mediterranean. Winters are Atlantic gray, the kind that settles in November and does not fully lift until March. The wind off the water is serious and residents dress accordingly. Summer fills the harbor with French families, not foreign tourists, and the town becomes exactly what it looks like in photographs. But here is what most people miss. Granville hosts one of the most prestigious carnival festivals in northern France each February, a tradition running continuously for over 300 years. The town does not go quiet in winter, it goes local. Number 6. Sète, Occitanie. There is a town in the south of France, built on a narrow strip of land between the Mediterranean Sea and a vast inland lagoon. Canals run through the center. The fish market operates at 4 in the morning. The oyster beds stretch across the water in geometric patterns that look, from above, like a diagram of something important. Sète has around 44,000 residents and calls itself l'île singulière, the singular island, because it exists between 2 bodies of water, with mountains rising directly behind it. The poet Paul Valéry was born here. The singer Georges Brassens was born here. The town has produced an improbable concentration of French cultural figures for reasons that nobody has fully explained. Property prices average around 2,800 euros per square meter, approximately 140,000 euros for a 50 square meter apartment. A 2-bedroom house in the upper town with lagoon views recently sold for 165,000 euros. Canal-facing properties command more, But the outer neighborhoods of Villeroy and La Corniche offer genuine coastal living below the regional average. The Centre Hospitalier du Bassin de Tau provides full hospital services within the town itself. Montpellier's University Hospital is 35 kilometers away, 25 minutes by TGV. The train runs frequently throughout the day. Honest consideration. Set has been noticed. Educated French buyers have been arriving for a decade, and prices have risen accordingly. The window of genuine affordability is real but narrowing. Summer brings Mediterranean heat that makes midday movement inadvisable in July and August, and the narrow streets can feel crowded at peak season. But autumn in September through November may be the best-kept seasonal secret in southern France. The lagoon turns gold. The tourists have gone. The oyster season begins, and the town returns to itself. Number 5. Lorient, Brittany. The city of Lorient was almost entirely destroyed during the Second World War. Allied bombing targeted the German submarine base, one of the largest on the Atlantic coast, and leveled most of the surrounding town. What was rebuilt was functional rather than beautiful, and that is precisely why it is affordable. Lorient has around 57,000 residents on a natural harbor in southern Brittany, where two rivers meet the Atlantic. The rebuilt city is not picturesque in the way Vannes or Quimper are picturesque. It is honest. The architecture is 1950s. French Reconstruction, straight lines, practicality above aesthetics. But the harbor is extraordinary, and the sailing facilities are among the best in France. The Vendée Globe, one of the most demanding ocean races in the world, starts and finishes here. Average price, €1,900 per square meter, among the lowest for any coastal city in France. A 3-bedroom harbor-facing apartment recently sold for €148,000. A detached house in residential neighborhoods is available from €160,000 to €200,000. The TGV from Lorient reaches Paris Montparnasse in 3 hours, 10 minutes. Rennes is 1 hour, 20 minutes. The Centre Hospitalier Bretagne Atlantique in Vannes, 30 minutes by train, is one of Brittany's largest hospitals. Lorient maintains its own hospital center with full emergency services. Honest consideration. Lorient's post-war architecture divides opinion, and that is a legitimate concern, not one to dismiss. The surrounding coastline, including the Quiberon Peninsula and the Groix Island Ferry, is spectacular. But the city center requires a pragmatic eye. What most visitors miss entirely, the Intercultural Festival each August is one of the largest Celtic music events in the world, drawing performers from Brittany, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Galicia, and Asturias. For 1 week every summer, Lorient becomes something entirely unexpected. Number 4. Fécamp, Normandy. A fishing town on the alabaster coast of Normandy, where the cliffs are so white they seem lit from within. The town sits in a narrow valley between chalk headlands, one of the only natural harbors along this stretch of coast, which is why Fécamp has been a working port for over 1,000 years. Population: approximately 18,000. The town is known in France for two things: the herring fishing that sustained it for centuries, and the Benedictine liqueur, produced since 1,863 inches, a palace so architecturally improbable, it looks like a Gothic novelist designed it on an ambitious afternoon. The distillery is open to visitors year-round, and the combination of maritime history and ecclesiastical peculiarity gives Fécamp a character entirely its own. Average price, €1,600 per square meter. A 2-bedroom house in the town center recently sold for €89,000. A 3-bedroom with a garden and partial sea views sold for €135,000. On a coast where Etretat has been discovered and repriced entirely, Fécamp remains genuinely undervalued. The University Hospital in Rouen, one of the largest in northern France, is 1 hour by road. Paris Saint-Lazare is 2 hours 30 minutes via Rouen by train. Honest consideration. Fécamp's herring economy has contracted significantly, and some streets carry that history visibly. The town is not in crisis, but it is not in boom, and certain areas require careful selection. What no property listing captures is the cliff Walking the coastal path north toward Etretat on a September morning, chalk white against a pale blue sky, the channel spreading out below. The question of why more people do not live here has no satisfactory answer. Number 3. Port Vendres, Occitanie. The smallest town on this list. Around 4,500 permanent residents. A harbor so compact it seems designed to fit maximum beauty into minimum space. Fishing boats in primary colors tied alongside stone quays. The Pyrenees visible to the west on clear days, their peaks catching a light that belongs to a different altitude entirely. Port Vendres sits at the southern end of the Languedoc coast, 8 kilometers from the Spanish border. It is not Collier, the famous neighbor that Matisse painted, and that now operates almost entirely as a tourist attraction. Port Vendres still fishes. Anchovy boats go out at night and return at dawn. The fish auction happens on the quayside before most visitors are awake, and the rhythm of the working harbor sets the pace for everything else in town. Average price, €2,400 per square meter. A harbor view apartment recently sold for €118,000. A 2-bedroom hillside house with partial sea views sold for €142,000. For genuine Mediterranean living on the French side of the border, at this price point, Port Vendres is almost without comparison. The Centre Hospitalier de Perpignan is 35 minutes away. Perpignan is a city of 120,000 with full urban services. The TGV reaches Barcelona in 50 minutes and Paris in 5 hours. Honest consideration. Port Vendres is genuinely small, and winter here requires adjustment. Businesses reduce hours, the population contracts, and the harbor returns to the fishing community that has always owned it. The summer tramontane, a cold, dry wind funneling down from the Pyrenees, arrives with force and lasts for days. Locals treat it as part of the landscape. But here is what no property listing ever mentions. The light in Port Vendres is different. Catalan light. It hits the harbor water in the afternoon and does something to the colors of the boats that is, simply, very difficult to leave. Number 2. Saint-Nazaire, Loire-Atlantique. A city that built the largest ships in the world. The SS Normandie was constructed here. The France, the Queen Mary II. The shipyards on the Loire estuary have been producing vessels that carry thousands of people across oceans for over a century, and they are still doing it today. Saint-Nazaire has around 68,000 residents where the Loire River meets the Atlantic, 45 kilometers west of Nantes. Like Lorient, it was heavily bombed during the Second World War, and the rebuilt city carries the same honest, functional quality. The property prices are among the lowest of any French city, with direct Atlantic access. Average price, €2,100 per square meter. A 3-bedroom house in residential areas recently sold for €178,000. A harbor-facing apartment sold for €145,000. The best surf beaches in the region are 20 minutes by car. The TGV to Paris takes 2 hours 30 minutes. Nantes, with one of the largest university hospital complexes in western France, is 45 minutes by train. The Centre Hospitalier de Saint-Nazaire provides full emergency and specialist care within the city itself. Honest consideration. Saint-Nazaire is an industrial city and does not pretend otherwise. The working shipyard is a presence, not a backdrop. The cranes are visible from large parts of the city, and the economy is tied to the yard in ways that create both stability and dependency. Residents who choose Saint-Nazaire tend to cite one quality above all others: the absence of pretension. This is a city that does not perform its own attractiveness. It builds ships, opens its beaches at the weekend, and gets on with things. That quality is either immediately appealing or entirely not, and most people know within the first hour of arriving. Number 1. Occitanie, Brittany. A 2-bedroom stone house on the Breton coast, a garden backing onto a field where horses graze in the mornings. The Atlantic, the actual, full, unmediated Atlantic, 400 meters from the front door. The asking price, €74,000. Occitanie sits at the southwestern tip of Brittany, on the Bay of Occitanie, where the Finistère coast curves toward the Pointe du Raz, the westernmost point of mainland France. Population, around 2,200. The harbor is active, the boats are real. The fish on Friday's market stalls came out of the water the night before. This is not a town performing its own quaintness for visitors. It is simply a place where people have fished for centuries and continue to do so. Average price, €1,400 per square meter, the lowest on this list. A renovated two-bedroom house sold recently for €87,000. A larger property with outbuildings and land sold for €145,000. These prices exist not because Occitanie lacks beauty, it has some of the most dramatic coastal scenery in France, but because Brittany's far west has a declining population, winters that demand real commitment, and a location that requires effort to reach. Healthcare routes through the Centre Hospitalier de Pont-l'Abbé, 30 minutes by road for standard care. The nearest major hospital is Quimper, 45 minutes, with full emergency services. The TGV from Quimper reaches Paris Montparnasse in 4 hours 15 minutes. Brest, Brittany's largest city, is 60 kilometers north. Honest consideration. The remoteness is real and should not be romanticized. A GP appointment requires planning. A specialist consultation means a drive to Quimper. Winter here brings Atlantic storms that genuinely rearrange one's understanding of what weather can do. The coast is wild, the wind is structural, the rain arrives horizontally and the dark comes early. Year-round residents describe an intimacy with the landscape that takes time to earn, but once earned, becomes the reason they never leave. What Occitanie offers that no other town on this list quite matches is this: the sense that the land and the sea are still in genuine negotiation, that the horizon from the harbor wall is not a backdrop but a fact. The Pointe du Raz 15 minutes by road is where Brittany ends and the Atlantic begins in earnest. Standing there on a clear morning, lighthouse visible offshore, wind making normal conversation impossible, the question of why anyone would want to live within 50 kilometers of this place becomes very easy to answer. The house, 400 meters from that ocean, sold to a retired teacher from Lyon who had been searching for 3 years and had nearly given up. She paid €74,000. Final. 7 towns, 1 Atlantic coastline, 1 channel, 1 Mediterranean shore. Prices from €74,000 to €195,000 for genuine coastal property in genuine communities. France's forgotten coast is not a secret kept by locals. It is a secret kept by the assumption that France is expensive. That assumption belongs to Paris and the Riviera. The real France, the working harbors, the chalk cliffs, the Breton storms, the Catalan light, operates by entirely different numbers. The window is real. Prices in Brittany's far west, in the rebuilt Atlantic cities, in the fishing towns of Occitanie, have not yet reached what equivalent coastline commands in Britain or northern Spain. They will. But right now, in 2026, the calculation still works. 7 towns, your move.